I'm Ron Craig for The Rooted Word, and we're going to go through our study in Jacob, or James, and we're going to deal with verses 5 through 8 today. Again, we're contrasting it with the King James Version, which is the most accurate one in English on a word-to-word basis. It's still, like I said before, wildly off on some things, or even omits some things, small or big. But we're going to compare our translation of the Rooted Word to the King James and its expository type preaching. So in verse 5, we're going to read the King James first. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. So I hope you understand what that means. Sometimes the King James can seem a little enigmatic in its vocabulary, but if you focus a little hard, you can figure out what it means. If any of you lack wisdom, that's easy. Let him ask of God, that's easy. That giveth to all men liberally. You know, we usually say who, right? So they have that giveth. Who gives to all men liberally, like generously. And upbraideth not. To upbraid is like to criticize, right? Upbraideth not. And it shall be given him. So saying God doesn't criticize us when we're asking, like for wisdom especially, it says. So ours says, in contrast, that's a word that's missing from the King James, by the way, is de, which means but, or in contrast. You can translate it a couple different ways. In contrast, if any of you is being left behind from wisdom, he must implore of God, the one giving to all sincerely, although the one not naming faults, and it will be given him. So it's pretty different structure from the King James, because we're trying to keep the structure of the Greek as much as possible, unless it just really doesn't make sense. Like the de usually comes second in the sentence, so we could say, if in contrast any one of you, we could have said that, right? But we chose to say in contrast to have it more directly with the thing that's being contrasted. In contrast, if any one of you is being left behind from wisdom, so it's like wisdom is moving, right? And you're being left behind. You're not keeping up with it. Here's wisdom moving. You're not keeping with wisdom, in step with wisdom, but you're being left behind because you can't keep up. He must implore of God. So it's not just ask. Implore is even more serious and more dedicated asking. It's not quite begging, but it's pretty close. But it's not asking. Asking is kind of passively, almost passively, right? It's like, hey, you going to the store? But instead, are you going to the store? Maybe you're going to the store today, maybe in an hour or two, and you're going to the store, aren't you? Soon? Maybe tomorrow? When are you going to the store? You got to get milk, right? You got to go to the store soon. You're asking and setting up these different scenarios. So maybe. That's imploring. He must implore of God. Now this is, the next part's describing God. The one giving to all sincerely. All right? Sincerely. It's not generously or liberally. It's sincerely. So God does not give and then take back. Or he doesn't say he's going to give and then not give. Right? God's not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? Numbers, right? So he's sincere. He gives sincerely. Although the one not naming faults. So he'll give sincerely, and he'll also not name your faults while giving. And it will be given him. Now let's look at verse 6. King James. But let him ask in faith, not wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. We have in verse 6, moreover, he must implore in faith, depending on his own governance in nothing. For the one depending on his own governance has already resembled a violent agitation of the sea, being driven by the wind, Then being thrown flat on the ground hastily. This is pulling to the surface all of the imagery and the roots of these Greek words and bringing those into the meaning of that surface word. Now, I do notice one thing that is actually unusual. We don't use the word faith in the New Testament when we translate. We use persuasion because it literally means persuasion, and the word faith in English has this kind of aspect of a mystical or magical quality to it. And the word faith doesn't have that, pistis. It doesn't have that. So he must implore in persuasion. So I've got to make sure that gets changed. Depending on his own governance in nothing. So, nothing wavering for he that wavereth. So that wavering is depending on your own governance, is literally what it means from those words. And that's interesting. That sets a whole different tone to the doctrine of humility and dependence on God. For the one depending on his own governance has already resembled a violent agitation of the sea. So that's already happened by the time he's depending on his own governance. So he started by resembling a violent agitation on the sea. Violent agitation on the sea. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Right? And he's moving and moving and moving, but not by his own volition. It says, being driven by the wind. What is the wind? Something invisible. Something very forceful that can create great havoc. It can wreak havoc, and it can destroy. And it's driving him and building him and driving him, and he doesn't even know how to get out of it. He's trapped in that. Then being thrown flat on the ground hastily, like a wave when it hits the shore. Bam. Without warning. Bam. He's thrown down hastily. Verse 7, King James. For let not that man think that he shall receive anything of the Lord. The rooted word. For that man must not himself make it like as though he will himself take anything from alongside the Lord. A little different, right? Because for that man must not himself make it like as though he will himself take anything from alongside the Lord. He should not even pretend. He should not even speak like that, because it's not going to happen. It will not happen. Verse 8. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. This is a radically mistranslated word, double-minded. What we have is a male with a two-faced soul is completely without stability in all his ways. And it's literally two-souled. But if we say two-souled, it sounds like there are two souls in a man, which is not correct doctrine. But there can be two faces to the soul. Two sets of opinions, two sets of emotions, and two sets of intentions. And they are opposite. They war against each other. That reminds you probably of Romans 7, right? Where Paul's talking about the person who still doesn't have the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And you have these two divided ways in the man. Okay, so now let's talk about how to apply this. If any one of you is being left behind from wisdom, he must implore God, the one giving to all sincerely, although the one not naming faults, and it will be given him. So, you can ask for God, you can ask from God wisdom, and he will give it. He will sincerely give you wisdom if you ask. Even if you've done something wrong, you can ask for wisdom and he will give it to you. Unless you're trying to govern your own life. That's the exception. You cannot even pretend that you're going to receive or take anything from God. You're governing your own life. And if you're governing your life, you're the one deciding whether you get something, whether you take something. You're not waiting for the Lord to give it to you, because then you're allowing him to govern your life. So if you're governing your life, that's why it says, as though he will himself take anything from alongside the Lord. Not that the Lord will give it to him, right? But that he'll take it from the Lord. So you need to first make sure you're not governing your own life. And that goes back to that one in the verses before about remaining humbly through to the other side in the midst of these piercings, right? This humility is one of the primary bedrock features, core features of a Christian life. And if you're not practicing it, you're not a Christian. You're governing your own life. You can't even pretend like you're able to take anything from the Lord or that he's giving you anything. You have to humble yourself and let the Lord be the Lord of your life. Let him be the one who governs your life in all ways every day. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it. And be honest about it. And then do it. But if you are doing that and you're being left behind in wisdom, you can ask God. And no matter what you've done, except for that, right? No matter what you've done, what else you've done, he will not be naming faults. Now, you may say, well, but he says, the one not naming faults, so that means every fault. No, because in context, there is a fault that he may not name, but will still hinder you from receiving that wisdom. And it says it. So you can't then limit that and say, oh, no, it means no. Anything I do, can't be held against me and he'll give me wisdom. No, that's not what it says. You can pretend like it says that, but it says that for that man must not himself make it like as though he will himself take anything from alongside the Lord. Then you're being exactly that man who's trying to govern his own life. And you cannot have this two-faced soul, because that's what that man has. On the one hand, he wants to pretend like, he is for the Lord. On the other hand, he wants to run his own life. You cannot have it both ways and expect you're going to get anything from the Lord.